And we know now that if you only make people afraid, then they want to reject the entire message.
So all of their friends eat a lot of meat, their parents eat a lot of meat, and they say they don't get influenced by it. Yeah, when there are social norms, they will be influenced by it.
A girl, she told me how important for her it was that to take care of animals and the dogs and the cats. And then I asked, okay, that's interesting. And what about cows and pigs? She stopped thinking about their welfare.
Did they give any reasons also in your research why they would change or not change their behaviors towards a more sustainable one?
Very often the sustainable behavior is more difficult to perform than the unsustainable behavior. But if you succeed in changing things and you can get some sort of chain reaction, then change is possible, I think.
So today we actually have two guests on our episode. I welcome Willemijn and Bregje. Both we're going to talk about now behavior and a research that Bregje just did and is still doing. But first, Willemijn, starts with you. Why did you find, and I know that you're very interested in human behavior. If we can see your profile on LinkedIn, for instance. But I wondered already directly, why did you find your interest in particular this field?
Well, I had to think about it, about this question. But when I'm a child of the 80s, and the HIV/AIDS epidemic was very big at that time, and I was very afraid about it. And I saw all these advertisements on television about the importance of using condoms and getting tested. And I remember this campaign with a bee flying from flower to flower as a metaphor for having sex with multiple partners and then dropping dead suddenly. And that was the health campaign warning people to have safe sex or to not to have sex with too many partners. I don't know, but it was very impressive for me. And I thought, oh wow, I want to work when I'm big. I want to work to develop campaigns in this field. By the way, now I think that this campaign with the flowers and the bees has actually many negative sides, and I wouldn't recommend such a campaign. And I did some research for my study. I did social psychology, and then I studied health psychology. So very long, actually, I was pursuing this career, and I did even research into HIV testing behavior in Tanzania. And then I was in health psychology field actually, and then I did a PhD thesis into food portion sizes. Maybe we come to talk about it later, and eating behavior. And then later on, I switched to, well, maybe we also come to talk about that, but I switched to sustainability issues and behavior. But I think it started with these HIV/AIDS campaigns.
I am curious, how would you change the campaign now? Like, what are the negative cues, and how would you transform it into?
Well,
how would be the new campaign?
Yeah, well, they worked with fear appeals actually because they made people afraid. There was even a more stronger campaign in the UK, I believe, where they played a bowling game with and then the cones were people who died. So it was like age can kill you, and I think it was even with I don't know the English words, but skeleton,
Skeletons.
skeletons. Yeah. So it was really fear appeal, and we know now that if you only make people afraid, then they want to reject the entire message. So you always have to combine fear appeals with behavioral advice that is feasible for people to perform, for instance. And it's also very stigmatizing now because maybe having multiple partners is okay, but you have to have safe sex, for instance.
Yeah, probably HIV still for our generation is quite a strong word when it comes to a disease. Probably it's not as strong as it used to be, but at least awareness wise. What about you, Bregje? How is for you? When did you get interested by human behavior?
I won't know exactly when, but I know I always was like a bit of a dreamer, so I always was thinking like, where does like someone's behavior come from? And in high school, really wanted to become a doctor first, like a child's doctor first, and because that was like a bit too hard for me to become, I wanted to do something with psychology because that would be a bit easier. And I also had philosophy classes, and they were like really interesting for me too, because it was like all about the perspective of life, and I thought it was really interesting that everyone has another perspective of life, and I think that was the point I really wanted to learn more about it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's good to let our audience know what is now both for you, like your background currently that you pursue.
I study applied psychology now, and I'm in my third year, so I haven't finished it yet, but almost. And before I was in high school, and I did HAVO. What's that called in Dutch? It's like
Yeah,
another school system, but yeah.
we can like it's hard to explain that internationally, like this Dutch.
Well, yeah, as I told you, I studied social psychology and health psychology and did research afterwards. And then I started working also at the applied psychology bachelor, where what Bregje is studying now, about 10 years ago. But then a few years ago, the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, which we both study and work, started developing a new master's program in our faculty about behavior change and sustainability issues. And I was asked to join the team and develop this master. And then I was actually very happy because since I was a child, I was very engaged with the environment and all the issues and problems. And now I could finally apply my psychological knowledge into this field. So that was very nice. And now I work at this master's program because we succeeded in getting it there. And this September it started. And it's really, really very, well, it's a joy to work with these students who are all very committed to these sustainability issues and translate their knowledge directly into their work because it's a part-time master. So the half of my work week is I'm working in this master's program, and the other half I'm working in the research group um, that is Psychology for Sustainable Cities. It's called. It's a research group in the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences.
Yeah, and why did sustainability got your interest already when you were young?
Yeah, I think I was very, I don't know, I was very worried about it. Also with the gap in the ozone layer. I don't know how you say it in English, but yeah, I was very concerned about it. And a few weeks ago, I was going through old letters, and I found an application to the um, Association for Vegetarians. And I must have been 6 when I wrote these people asking how I could eat vegetarian while my parents didn't do so. I cannot really explain, but it was funny because I had completely forgotten about it, and then I found it back. So it must have been a very important topic for me since I was about 6, I think. Which doesn't mean that I since then ate consequently as a vegetarian, because that's not the case.
I had a question that it was regarding these masters, and I would like to know what is the impact of the studies of human behavior, or people that dedicate to this kind of field in society, like the people that does this master, how do they enter into market or into the world, how do they apport something to the world?
Well, they already do, because when they enter this master, um, they have to enter it with a specific project or question, like for instance, how can we stimulate the employees of organization X to go to their work by means of public transport or bike, or how can we have students from school Y eat more plant-based. So that's their starting point, and they only can enter this master if they have such a question and that their employer really wants this question to be answered. and that in their organization or target group they can actually implement an intervention. So the things they learn they can actually implement at the same time.
Yeah, and they are already like probably studying what they think is interesting. So
Yeah.
that is a really, yeah. And I also want to, as far as I understand, there has been recently a research that's been done between you, Willemijn and Bregje. Could you, Bregje, tell us a little bit more about what this study has been about?
Yes, the study was about, it was a certain target group also. It was MBO students, so that's also like a Dutch school system, like a part of the Dutch school system.
See, like a lower level of
Yeah, education.
education.
And more
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah, it's more practical, and their ages were from 16 to 20 years old. And we studied how what their food choices are, and the target of the research is how do we stimulate them to eat more sustainable and healthy food? So that would be plant-based. So we did some interviews with them, and I also did my own research and also did like a survey at this target audience.
Maybe we can dive into this. Like so far, what kind of unique insights can you tell us?
Maybe can I just add some things, because I think it's the reason that Bregje and other interns have studied this. It's a big project in which we work with I don't know how many, but many more HBO more applied universities in throughout the entire country, and more MBO schools. So it's a collaboration in which we try to grasp the entire country and assess people's eating motives, especially into eating more plant-based, with the goal of developing interventions that can actually make them eat more plant-based. And what we really want to do or try to do is not to develop these interventions for them, but with them. And Bregje is actually engaged in the first part, in which we really want to dive into the motives and the why of their eating behavior. And then the next phase is really develop with these students, develop interventions. So we can only talk about this first part, which is not even finished yet, because we still didn't conduct all the interviews and focus groups. But you have, I think, insights from your part already.
Yes. So some insights about this research were that like one important thing was that they are really thinking about their health by making food choices, but their perspective of health, I think, is a bit different than like what other people's perspectives might be. So they want to eat healthy, but their behavior shows something else. They're not always like eating healthy. So that's something that really popped out. And also, like, their environment was in the evening mostly their parents. Like, in their home space, they like always ate meat. So every evening they ate meat, potatoes, and greens. That's like really Dutch dinner, and that's they ate it like a lot. So
it's a habit.
Yeah, it's a habit for them. So it's pretty hard to stand like off those habits.
I am curious about one thing of the study itself, that is the fact of that probably for the study you need to define in your framework what sustainability means, and I am curious to know what is sustainability according to the study, like what is recognized as a sustainable option, because it happens that for many times when we have talked with different guests or with different people in the food industry, they not necessarily agree on what is sustainability for them. So I'm curious, like in the framework of this study, what do we refer as sustainable and sustainability?
I think in this study it is eating more plant-based, So it's defined as eating plant-based, and we didn't define it any further. It's not We're not like targeting at these MBO students have to eat 2 meals a week or something plant-based, because we first want to explore uh, what their motives are, and it's also about lunch behavior. It's more focused on lunch behavior because there we can intervene more easily. But plant-based is, I think, the way of specifying sustainable eating behavior.
Yeah, well, because I don't want to say the word assuming, but taking into account, no, that eating plant based is more sustainable than eating meat because of all the usage of resources of animal uh, industry and animal food, right? No, so in that sense, it's more sustainable than
Yeah.
eating. Yeah, okay, that is
Yeah, it's about the I'm looking for the word, the emissions of broeikasgassen, CO2 and other. But it's
greenhouse gas
also,
emissions, no?
yeah, thank you, green. Yeah, and it's also about water use, land use. So yeah, in that respect, it's considered as much more sustainable, I'd say.
So, like the challenges that you showed us from this research are mainly, I can understand, like, of as I heard, are about the understanding what is like a healthy or more sustainable diet. What does it include as well for this group, and that their environment makes a difference, right? Like that there's just a habit around a diet that is not yet as sustainable as it could be.
Yes.
Their social environment,
Yeah, their social environment and like there are really social norms through by eating meat. So all of their friends eat a lot of meat. Also, their parents eat a lot of meat, and they say they don't get influenced by it. But when there are social norms, they will be influenced by it, although they don't want it or don't know it.
Did they give any reasons also in your research why they would change or not change their behaviors towards a more sustainable one?
In the interviews, we didn't really ask a lot about it, but they think meat is like really nice, really like meat, and they also think there some of the students really were really like healthy and sporting a lot, and they thought there were like a lot of proteins in meat and in yogurt, so they couldn't stop eating it because they will miss their proteins.
and I think that's really interesting because health is actually some kind of container word, because somebody can say, yeah, it's healthy for me, and mean something by saying that, meaning something completely different than I maybe think about when I say healthy. Because of course we know that eating more plant-based really contributes to less risk of heart diseases and diabetes type 2, all those things. But when an MBO student, or maybe any student or younger person, maybe for him or her, it's much more important that you have muscles and proteins and that you can sport or that you feel healthy in the short term. So health is actually a very layered word, I think.
I am
Yeah.
not really aware of what are the normally performed jobs by people that is studies an MBO, but maybe is it related to the fact that those kind of jobs also require like having a better physics, no, like a better, more muscle than for example other kind of jobs that maybe people from I don't know
Or more
uh,
sitting.
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
not always. We did interviews at a stewardess, and yeah, maybe they have to look nice. But we also did interviews at an animal the school with animal study.
Caregivers of animals.
Yeah, so I don't think they do have to look really nice.
But I am not only talking about looking nice, but for example, as far as I understand, there are a lot of MBO students that work in factories, and they require sometimes, yeah, moving things from one place to another, and also even the the workday, it requires like a better stamina or resistance
Mhm.
sometimes than
Interesting
the sitting
thoughts.
jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. I actually think it's more an age thing because like they're 16 to 20 years old, so they're maybe more busy with how they look. Um, if I look at my environment, I'm 21 now, and a lot of people in my environment are busy with like sporting and looking good. And I think also because of social media that they see a lot of sport videos and food videos also, like with you have to eat a lot of meat for your proteins and have to eat a lot of yogurt. So I think it's more an age thing than
That's also
a
an important
study.
finding, I think, because we started this study with, oh, these MBO students, and we have to look into them to see what happens, because we don't know very much of people with this educational background. But maybe the conclusion is that they're not that different from any other adolescent, because you have to cope with other issues than when you're older, for instance. So
Yeah.
they're not also the things you mentioned, that they eat what their parents eat, or that it's really important that their health is here and now good and that they're looking good, is not so specific maybe for MBO versus other educational groups.
What about gender? Because I am thinking that also this eating meat. I can relate to a lot of content creators that are guys that tell you like eat a lot of meat. Meat is masculine. They want eating plant based will. I've heard it in many videos that it will affect your hormones. You will be like and I am just thinking like, do you see also that this projection to eat more meat is more prom- predominant in men than in women, or is it more or less the same when it comes to this group?
Well, I actually only interviewed girls, so I have no idea how it
Oh,
is with boys. I don't have an overall look from all the interviews. I haven't gotten so far, so it was girls that were eating a lot of proteins. That's the fun thing
okay,
about
okay,
it.
But we will
interesting.
look into this when we have all the interviews completed,
Yeah.
which I found very interesting, by the way, because I joined Bregje last week with the interviews, and I also spoke to some MBO students in the animal care study. And it was really interesting also to talk with them about animal welfare, because a girl, she told me how important for her it was that to take care of animals and the dogs and the cats, and she was really very much into these animal welfare issues. And then I asked, okay, that's interesting, and what about cows and pigs? And that was something completely different. So that was another category, and she stopped thinking about their welfare. It's also something we call in psychology strategic ignorance, that you can just put some kind of wall in your brain for the things you really don't want to look at. So she had this wall between the animals that you can take into your house, and I think many people have. So what she told is of course very representative for all of us, but for her it was so clear, because she really cared about horses and dogs and cats, but not really about the. And at the same time, because I just a few minutes before I said, well, maybe the MBO student is not that different from other students, but there was one, well, small, maybe,
Change.
well, a difference. We're not sure yet, but we have some indications that there might be a difference when we look into this animal welfare thing, because, well, maybe
Yeah,
you can tell it better.
I did a small survey with MBO students and with like other people from 16 to 20 years old to see the difference. And I asked them what was the most important theme for choosing a plant-based lunch, and they could choose between I think like 6 themes. Um, and the MBO students mostly choose health, taste, and then it was animal welfare. And none of them choose climate change or climate. And the other students, for them, the most important thing was taste. Um, and health wasn't important at all. um, and animal welfare was, none of them choose animal welfare
And
as
climate?
a theme. And climate they did a little bit more, but also not a lot. So it was really interesting to see how MBO students choose animal welfare as a more important thing to choose and plant-based lunch than the other students.
So that might be more of an entrance to change their behavior than
Yeah.
talking about climate change and eating
Exactly.
plant-based.
Exactly. Phrase it differently, the message in that sense. To that particular group, right? Because there's also different and to define that group even more and more, but you already did that part. How does like future research then look like?
Well, that's after we finish all the interviews, and we're going to do some additional focus groups with the students, and then we're going to um, do some more design interventions with them and see what they would like to uh, how they would like their food environment to be, for instance, and how you can foster plant-based choices among among them.
Yeah. I thought I also wanted to make challenges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Genesis as well.
Yeah.
Very good insights. You know, it's very interesting to dive into that part.
Mhm.
And um, you already mentioned slightly a misconception, maybe what we find right between now lower education and a bit higher education around behavior. Are there maybe any other
In
insight that
this
you,
in this group specifically, or in general, how we
in
think people
general,
make?
in general maybe?
Yeah. Um, I think well, what you often see is that people, when you ask people to explain their own behavior, they very often say, "Well, it's my own deliberate choice. I make it individually. I know what I do. I'm not affected by my peers or friends or family, and I'm not affected by marketing." But when you do more experience with experimental research, you can of course change the conditions and see what happens, and then we know that these things affect behavior. And also with price, very often people say that price is very important. And also so it's something we say in general, price is very important. And also when you ask people, why did you eat this or buy that, then we also say very often it's taste and it's price. And well, taste, I think that's true. And price, of course, is also true. But at the same time, when you change prices, for instance, I did a study into worksite cafeterias, and then we also changed prices, but just a little bit. And then people very often don't notice these differences and just buy what they would buy also when the price was the original price. So price only counts when you really make big price difference, or if you succeed in affecting the perceived price. But the price in itself, it's not that people are that rational and calculating each purchase, because people make about 200 food choices a day. So it takes too much time to deliberately think about all these changes. It's very often it's a routine, it's habitual behavior, it's affected by what your other people are doing or marketing. So many things are not that deliberate as we think it is.
I remember in one podcast that we recorded one episode some long ago with another uh, woman that she was studying also a little bit of how policy could affect food policies could affect behavior, and he mentioned one thing that I was just remembering because you were mentioning this thing of the price, that when a person is in a routine, maybe they don't really realize so much about. I mean, if you go to the same supermarket and you buy the same brand of whatever, and it is slightly more expensive, maybe they will be a little bit like, oh, it changed the price, but they will still buy it. But then when you change completely the environment in my moving to another city and you go for the first time to a different supermarket, then maybe that will be the first time that you say, like, since it's not routine anymore, that you say, oh, maybe instead of buying this brand of cheese, I will buy this other brand because now price affects me more
I
than
believe
before.
that's called disrupt, then reframe. So there are some instances or life events in which people are particularly vulnerable for changing their habits. And that's also why we wanted to study these MBO students, because it's a point in life when, well, we hope for them it's possible with the difficulty of buying houses or getting rooms, but you hope for them that they can start living on their own and developing their own habits and routines. And then it's a very interesting moment for them to change their behavior because they're more open for change. And if you succeed them in changing their behavior or adopting more sustainable ways of living, that they can do that for the rest of their lives. So it's actually an interesting window of opportunity.
So, like, are people more open during their studies to change their behaviors?
Well, there is research saying that if people have major life events, for instance, a new job or living on your own or starting new studies, exactly what Andres said, then you're more open to have a closer look at your habits and change them. So then from then on, you can make new routines and then you continue doing that.
I think that is really funny because every person I ever talked to about you get independent and then you get back to your parents for a holiday or something like that, then you start to notice that how much your life has changed on routine wise. You have one thing in your fridge, your parents have one thing in your fridge, and then you have to start to change again all your routine and your habits just to adapt to your parents. And then is when many people misses their independence, like they're going to their dorm, to their apartment, or anything like that. So you were mentioning this as one of the things that maybe could help students or people to to reformulate their habits and change it to a more sustainable way. What are the main mental challenges that stop people from choosing sustainable foods?
I think the main mental challenge would be social norms, because like if all your friends are eating animal products, then it's really hard to change that, because the norms aren't eating plant-based. So that was also something that popped out in the research, but I also recognize it. When all my friends are eating meat, then I think it's hard to choose something plant-based. It's harder to do so. And also when you grow up with it.
And it's also the availability physically. So if you go to a store or a supermarket, for instance, you see all these kinds of meat and animal-based products that are marketed more and more available, very often cheaper. Well, it is changing a little bit for the plant-based burgers, but very long time they used to be more expensive. So very often the sustainable behavior is more difficult to perform than the unsustainable behavior. So it's also challenging for people to do something that their friends and family don't do, which is less available. So it's quite difficult to do. And you have these routines that are more focused on animal-based food.
Yeah, and also you grow up with the fact that eating meat and animal products is like very good for you. So then it's really hard to change that, because it should be something good, and your brain is like thinking that it's something good, but then you have to change your behavior because it suddenly isn't something good anymore.
And it also has to do, I think, with the capacity to eating more plant-based, because that was also something that struck me during the interviews, and I heard it more often, that when you talk about eating plant-based or vegetarian, immediately they were talking about, yes, it's not that tasty, these plant-based burgers. So for them, eating plant-based equals eating burgers. Whereas if you cook differently, for instance, more, I don't know, Asian food that is less relying on plant-based animal-based products, then it's not a very big change in your meal. But if you eat the traditional Dutch dish with potatoes, meat, and vegetables, and you replace this piece of meat with a plant-based burger, which, I'm sorry to say, but is not as tasty as meat most of the time, then it's so it also has to do with your cooking skills and also knowing the benefits of eating plant-based also for your health in the long term. That are things that I think many people don't realize enough.
I really believe that plant-based eating plant-based meats or plant-based alternatives a lot of times is a transition step to eating a more plant-based diet that a lot of times it just becomes to more pulses, more grains, more nuts, and many other things. Of course, you can still incorporate from time to time the alternatives, but at least from my experience, there's a moment where you say, "Well, I would prefer to do something with these other ingredients than with the plant-based alternatives, or maybe use them from time to time as a replacer." We're excited to announce that we are official media partners with Future of Protein Production event in Amsterdam between October 23rd and 24th. Don't miss out. Use the special discount code that we leave in our description to join us in this groundbreaking event. But I wanted to ask one thing about the social norms. Is it when we talk about social norms, I guess that we talk about different groups, friends, family. Is it friends that the most influential group, or it comes more from other sides like family or colleagues or things like that?
Hmm. Well, and I think the essential part of being an adolescent is that your peer groups are getting much more important. I think that's a very healthy development that many adolescents have. So I think that what your friends do is very important. At the same time, what as Bregje told, very often these students still live with their parents,
Yeah.
and then what is eaten at their house for that reason also impacts their eating behavior.
Yes, because also the parents do the groceries. Like they have influence on what's in the house, like what they have for food, and also they do the cooking. So yeah, they don't have to say a lot about it. It's like what your parents buy and what your parents cook. That's what you're eating, and maybe that creates some social norms also, but um, yeah, maybe they're not like very aware that they take over those norms from their parents. I don't think they wanted to, so yeah.
Maybe it's also interesting to make a difference between descriptive social norms, so that's how we perceive the behavior of other people. So that's that describes the norm, and maybe then what your parents do is the affecting the descriptive norm. But you also have the injunctive norm. That's how you think other people think about certain issues, and maybe in that, so also how we talk about things, for instance. And I think in that respect, the peers, the age group, and the friends are very important.
I, this is good. Good that you explained the distinction between these two. I also did research on behavior to see how people, why do people choose to eat oats, and then to see like, okay, they eat it daily. Some people eat it moderately, and some people don't eat it at all. So we divided these groups, and then the social norms was also like a high factor in that, using a behavior model to define more things from your experience so far, like looking at changing behaviors towards a more sustainable one, what are like maybe promising insights into how we can change the behavior from yeah, maybe you have to define groups for that for before you actually can do it, but
Well, what I really think is promising, because sometimes, to be honest, you can get a little bit pessimistic about how can we change in this food system and how can we change behavior. And really, because people always talk about wanting, or not always, but many people say they are flexitarian and want to eat less animal-based products, but at the same time we see these numbers not really getting lower. So that's sometimes something to get a little bit pessimistic about. But what I really makes me optimistic is that dietary behavior and food choices can really change over time. So we always talk about these things in terms of, yeah, this is how we do it, and that's it. And some things we consider as food, and other things as not as food, and therefore as disgusting. It has to do with how we categorize certain things. But that's very actually much more flexible than we think, because who would have known that we eat I don't know, avocados nowadays, or matcha tea, or or that people in other countries find it very normal to eat cats and dogs, and that we find it disgusting. But it's not something that is a biological fact. It's just how we are socialized, and it also can, our perceptions and behavior can change. And I think that these are things that go into some, I don't know, spirals, or that one behavior can affect the other and get bigger at the same time. So maybe sometimes it seems very difficult to change these patterns of behavior, but if you succeed in changing things and you can get some sort of chain reaction, then change is possible, I think.
I mean, nice examples are actually just traditional foods in general. Like, look at a tomato. It's fine to be a very traditional food in Italian cuisine, but before it wasn't even a product that was growing in Italy. It came via America, and over the years it gets in in their culture, right? I mean, it's everywhere in their cuisine. Same happened. Another thing is lobster, for instance, which was first perceived as a very cheap product for a low economic groups, like even like prisoners got it. It's now all up to the ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never you have to go into look into these things. It's literally it went all the way up to like a high exclusive product that it is now. And it was actually years before it was given to prisoners, because it was a very cheap product and nobody wanted to eat it,
That's
because
interesting.
it was this dirty animal that was
Mm.
just walking over the sea. So it's like changing, yeah, that's specific on products, right? This is changing a whole behavior towards a more sustainable one, and maybe that's also very difficult to do in the end, because you go um, like talking about the difficulties to to change a behavior. What are like the difficulties if we want to change a behavior on a large scale, like what we try to do, well, what a lot of people try to do now towards a more sustainable one?
Well, I can say some things about why it's difficult to affect behavior into sustainability issues. Let me start about the cognitive biases. That's from a literature study from Korteling and colleagues. They looked at a few cognitive biases that people experience facing climate issues. And the first of these biases is that it's very is called experiential vagueness. So climate change is very um, well, it occurs gradually, so we don't really sense it in our daily lives. So people don't really um, yeah, it's not very tacit or concrete for people, so it's difficult to use that as a reason for changing your daily life. Well, the second is maybe a bit related to the first one, that it's very complex. So it's very complex and technical information that you need to understand and grasp in order for it to change your behavior. So you really must be motivated to understand the complexity of it. So, and people are very often don't have enough time or motivation, and it's also a bit unpleasant. So very often people don't really understand what's happening. And a third bias is that it's a threat of the status quo. So we find it all enjoyable to eat meat and animal-based products because it's nice and it's normal and other people do it. And when you have people in your house and you want to give them food, it's really something we perceive as normal. And if you change that, people can also have a fear of falling, for instance, that we are adjusted to this level of luxury in our lives and comfort, and it's difficult to let that go. And it's also that's the I believe fourth. It's a threat of our social status. So very often, unsustainable behavior has more social status. So maybe this has not to do with eating, but flying for your holiday to New York or something has more status than going to Vlieland. Or eating a T-bone steak is maybe more, in certain groups you have more social status than making tofu for the people. So it has to do with social status. It also has to do with your personal interest versus the community interest. So you have to leave some advantages that you have in your life in the short term, because in the long term for the community it has some benefits. So if you make that equation, then it's very difficult and not always attractive, especially if you have the impression that you're the only one performing this sustainable behavior. Then you think, why would I do this and sacrifice myself in order for a group benefit that's very abstract? And the last also has to do maybe with the social norm we discussed earlier, but that's the group pressure. So you're affected by what other people do, as we discussed earlier. And if that's unsustainable, which very often is the case, then your behavior is more likely to be unsustainable as well.
Where do you see the future of sustainable eating heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
Um, well, I do think people are gonna eat less meat, but I don't think they will cut out meat like all of the meat. And mostly in the big cities, because like the social norms can change more in big cities. So what you see now, a lot of people are drinking oat milk and eating more vegetarian. And maybe in 5 years it will be like this in smaller cities too. So I think it will like expand a bit.
It's good. Like we always close one thing, and maybe yeah, well, it's nice to do as well. That our guest gets the opportunity to ask a question to us, because we asked all the time questions to you, and I didn't phrase anything. So
Can be a quick one.
it can be a quick one. I can also ask like, Shako, what are you going to eat tonight? No, you can think about it.
Oh, I'm interested. Are you a vegetarian or vegan yourself?
I'm flexitarian. I define myself as a flexitarian.
Okay, and do you want to eat more plant-based?
Plant-based, I incorporate already a lot of like different cuisines, recipes from cuisines where they have already, like what you said, Asian cuisine, where they have like dal, for instance, with lentils. Like I do that already, like well, I think for sure 3 times, 4 times a week.
Yeah, I would even say like 5 days a week I eat plant based when we cook at home, me and my partner. But if we go out, I do not restrict myself to vegetarian. Let's put it like that.
I have actually one question for two different. Yeah, I'm the one who has to leave, but still I have a different question for Andres than for Shaco. So, if I may, maybe first Andres, because you're from Spain. I'm going to Spain this summer, and I'm already a bit afraid of how we're going to do it when we eat out of home, which I hope to do very often because it's holiday. How are we going? How is it going in Spain with the plant-based or the protein transition?
May I ask where you're going?
Basque country. So
Basque
San
country.
Sebastian is good cuisine, of course.
Yeah. So I am not so familiar with Basque country itself, but in Spain, the vegetarian options are quite a norm nowadays. It's true that it depends if you go to smaller towns or if you move to in bigger places. The good thing about Basque cuisine is that there's a lot of pinchos, that is some sort of tapas. And in that sense, I would say that you can find a lot of things that are vegetarian. Uh, if we move to vegan, then maybe we would be in more trouble. But still, in bigger cities, you can always find places. My brother, his partner is vegetarian, and they go a lot of places in Spain to go, and they try so many different things. So I would say that it's possible. Truth is that they live in Madrid, that is the capital, and I guess that there's even more options. But San Sebastian, I would say that is really modern in that sense.
So we have to stick in the cities.
I mean, you can always find stuff, but it will be more complicated. That's what I have to say.
Like in the Basque country, they have high cuisine. Don't they
Yes.
offer a vegetarian menu next to the official one nowadays? Is that not the norm?
It's really normal, but I cannot promise you that it will be in every place.
No, of course.
Well, I'm going to find out. And for you, Shako, I'm very curious if we're looking at eating more plant-based. According to you, what is the biggest inspiration? Can be a person or a country or a cuisine, but what would be an inspiration for us?
Well, in inspiration, I think I would say where plant-based was already the norm in the culture itself from like the start, and I think that's Asian cuisine, right? Like just showing how, like I don't limit myself to an AVG in Dutch. Potato, meat, and vegetables. I found that so sad actually if you can make your food every day like that. Because like yeah, for me it's just I learned more cooking, right? Like I come also my father was a teacher for chefs, so it ended up like that. So I look I would say get the inspiration from there, showing how much you can do with just vegetables as the main ingredient itself, and let you be inspired, let you let you go on a journey with the tastes and experience that you get out of these recipes from these countries with spices and everything that you yeah you can find them nowadays in the supermarket though. Anyways.
Just the last question that we always do to close. It's really difficult, but sorry, we have to do it. What is your favorite food or dish?
Ooh. Oh, my favorite food. I
Oh,
think I have a lot of favorite foods, but I think it's pasta, and the best pasta I think is with salmon and spinach, tomatoes, and like cream cheese. I love that. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
well, this is an impossible question for me because it really depends on the season and the context and my mood and everything. But my discovery, I think my last year's discovery was ribollita, the Italian soup, which is very with how do you call it, with beans, of course, and a kind of cabbage, boerenkool in Dutch. But then the fresh
Ah.
one, that's really still a bit, well, very tasty and crispy, and and bread in it, and it's really when it's more winter, it's I think the best you can eat.
Yeah, looks like a winter. I'm gonna try this. I actually did never heard of it. So thanks for sharing.
Welcome.
Well, then this ask and thanks for your answers. We are gonna close the conversation. Thanks a lot, Willemijn and Bregje, for coming, for sharing your insights of your research. We believe that is really important. Both Shako and I are advocates of how consumer behavior is one of the main uh, important aspects of the transition to a more sustainable food system that sometimes is overlooked by certain people within the food industry. So we are really thankful that you came and you shared a little bit of your insights, and also even these bias that can be good for people even to realize sometimes if they are more affected than they think by their own cognitive. So thanks a lot, Willemijn and Bregje. Wish you the best for the coming research and also for your work.
Thank you very much. It was very nice talking to you.
Thanks for the invite.
Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.
I